Well, good afternoon, everybody. Good morning and good evening to those on the other sides of the planet. And welcome to an episode of FinalBossTV here on the 13th of October. My name is Adam K. And tonight we'll be joined by some people who apparently shouldn't actually be here. They should be in the sweatshop working on all that math. But tonight we're going to talk about Shadow Priests, where they came from, where they are now, a whole bunch of math. And then at the very end of the show, I actually have a beta test sort of thing to start off with you guys for the next episode. So stick around for that. But to jump right ahead into this and not waste any time. Oh, episode 11, Constant. Were you already there? No, you were not. Oh, why? It was. Okay, live editing. Hang on, wait a minute. This would be good for this. This would be good. This is good. Hang on. Something broke. Live editing, this would be good VOD. There we go, I fixed it. I fixed it. We're good to go. Alright. Alright. Let me bring up Skype. And of course, joining us again, my lovely co-host, Anna Fail. How are you doing, Anna?
Doing well, thanks. It's good to be here today.
And that live editing was a lot of fun. Oh, goodness gracious. I don't even know what happened. It like was all tiny and shrunk. So professional. I know, I'm sorry. We'll make up for it.
It's pretty pro.
We'll make up for it. So joining us as well, one of our first Shadow Priest extraordinaires here with us is going to be none other than Mr. Drye from Whatever We're Awesome. How are you, sir?
Doing well, how are you guys?
I think we're ready to go outside that little slip-up I just had, but I think no one will notice that. It's okay. Everyone on the live show already forgot about it. Everyone that watches the VOD won't know. And then, sitting over here in the corner, we had to prep this for the show, Mr. Twintop, SlashHug.
Hello.
That is how you make an entrance, right there.
That is how you make an
Everybody
entrance.
else we have on the show, take note. You will never outdo that.
I
That
know.
was really good.
It's just my Frostmourne.
It's just my
No,
Frostmourne.
whatever.
No big deal. Just this giant honking sword. No big deal.
Oh, that's so good.
I know, priests can't use swords.
Priests can't use swords. Oh no, we've messed up the lore. Oh gosh, we're
But I am
sorry.
human, so I
That
do
should be a
get.
hint to allow us to actually use them.
What have we done?
He brought that sword for me. I want that sword. It's mine now.
Oh, that's right. He's airmailing it to Anna after the show.
I actually got a new sword this week. I got a Heroic Warforged sword, the Haste Mastery one.
You
so
did.
I was pretty pumped.
I think we can all argue that Frostmourne went better than your sword you just got, though. Just saying.
I would agree. I would agree with that. Frostmourne's pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm. How heavy is that thing, by the way?
It's 35 pounds. I mean, it's a solid
It's enough
Yeah.
to make him
chunk.
gruntly
One of
lift
the interesting things is that it actually has the rivets in the handle, so it
Oh,
hurts
wow.
to hold.
Well, you don't have a big glove on. You need like you need a big oversized Final Fantasy glove on, because you look at like the human proportions in the cinematic for the guy Arthas, even like a 7-foot tall guy wouldn't have a Sonic the Hedgehog glove on. You know, it looks just, I don't know, it's crazy, but it's a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun. But to get right into the show here, so to recap, 'cause people have been always asking about where people are in progression that come on the show. So, real quick about me, we're 10 of 14 right now. We should have Thok dead tomorrow to go to 11. I don't know, Anne is in a similar boat right now. Where you guys at right now, Anne?
We worked on spoils this week. I think I'd be shocked if we didn't have it done tonight because we were so close on Thursday.
Yeah.
I love that fight because my 4-piece is amazing. So I'm doing double Mogu side, which is basically the best thing ever. And
So
just
jealous.
cleaving, yeah, Mogu is just cleave all the things, and it's wonderful. But we're currently 9 to 14, soon to be 10.
Yeah.
So.
And then, Drye, where are you guys at right now?
We are currently US 4th. We just got Paragon's kill on Heroic this week. So we're currently 13 of 14 working on Heroic Arash.
Nice.
Very nice.
You get your first pulls in, what, tonight and tomorrow?
We had a couple when we were done, because we killed it at like 11 EST, and we rated to 12, so we got like an hour of wiping to our rogue stinking.
Oh,
harsh.
And then, Twin, where are you guys at right now with SlashHug?
We got spoils this week on Wednesday and got a night of progression work on Thok. I was actually healing because we no longer have 8 full-time healers. So
you guys are going with You guys
Even
are gonna go.
I have to heal sometimes. During
Uh,
tier 14 and tier 15, I was healing as many progression kills as I
Yeah.
was guessing.
Are you you guys are doing the 8 healers straight on Thok, right?
Yes.
So that's
Although,
the what?
some toying with maybe a little holy DPS. I know I didn't want to bring it up, but
Oh no!
during phase 2, there's not a need for all the healers.
Hands off. Yeah, we're trying to muscle man it with 7, and then we have a huge assortment of like off heals. So I don't know. It's interesting because we have 2 enhancement shamans, an elemental shaman. No, we don't have an elemental shaman, do we? No. So we're messing with a whole bunch of
shaman.
Well, yeah, I think sometimes we had 4 in the raid, but I think we're running double. I remember. I think we have double resto in the raid. I can't even remember. So, but yeah, but it's interesting because I know like a lot of people do the 8 heal on it, but we're trying to do 7. But
thanks, Blizzard. 4 heal fights and 8 heal fights.
I know, right? That's the big thing.
It's done.
That's not why Thok is difficult and why he's a roadblock. It's because you gear up 5 or 6 healers before you get to him, and then all of a sudden you need 8, which is not a thing. So
it's typical. I mean, that always happens. There's always those tiers where you have to 3 or 4 heal one fight, and you have to 7 or 8 heal another fight. And for guilds that have this big roster, it's not a real big problem. But for guilds that run a light roster, sometimes it takes a lot of off-spec commitment. But that's okay. I guess that's what us hybrids are for. So
is that what it is? So then I know we talked a little bit about where you guys are at right now, but what have you guys been up to? Anna, what have you got outside of the raid scene right now? Anything to report?
I mean, that presupposes that I do anything that's not raiding. I mean, my life is pretty much like, wow, raid, talk about raiding, write about raiding, forum post about raiding, and I work. So my life has been pretty boring. I am super excited for BlizzCon, so I have been planning my outfits. I want to wear my main Tankaden t-shirt, and I want to wear my AJB t-shirt, and I want to wear stuff for this show. And I want to wear my Nerf Paladins t-shirt. No, my Buff Paladins t-shirt. Sorry, my Buff Paladins t-shirt. So I don't really think that I have enough days at BlizzCon to wear all of the t-shirts I want to wear. So that's the epic update in my life.
We'll just go right quick on
change rooms.
You'll have to go just to go on that real quick. Anna talked about how he wants to wear Final Boss stuff, and I noted about it in the pre-show, but just to get it officialized in the VOD, we are going to have at least wristbands, if not wristbands and buttons. The wristbands will be unisex. We were going to do one for Mob and Minion, like have 2 different color schemes, but it's just way too much work right now and the short time we have. So we're going to have wristbands. We're going to have buttons. We're trying to find the buttons that actually are printing to not just be circles, but actually be like the square circle layout we have for Ragnaros' little background. So if you see us at BlizzCon, everyone in the crew that's there, we're going to work out that everyone's going to have either or, and you can grab some from them. And you give them your guildies or whatever, share them around, wear them around at BlizzCon, talk about it, whatever you want to do. So I wanted to do t-shirts, but I'm sorry, that's just way too much expensive right now. That's just it. Going into t-shirts, if you're not selling them, maybe when we have a shop on the website, but right now it's just, that's a whole lot of money. So
but make sure that you're like pumping the show at BlizzCon and to all your friends and such so that we can grow and get more viewers and everyone can come watch. So it's going to be really important.
Well, I guess the big thing, I was going to talk about it later, but the way to, people keep asking about the show and transcoding live, and I have to force stream in 720p, right? Whereas you see it on YouTube as 720 or 480 or 360. To get transcoding options on Twitch right now to get partnered is so much harder than it used to be. So our only saving grace is to get it through YouTube. So if the YouTube grows and gets bigger, then we can apply for partnership through Twitch, through YouTube. So that's like the biggest thing. And we put up all the VODs and the after shows that they're up. And the after shows are like randomly put up or whatever. But that's the biggest way to help us out. And that's like the beta test I have coming at the end of the show, which we'll talk about more when we get there. And we'll see what happens with that. But enough derailing. Drye, what have you been up to?
Just progression. Really. There hasn't been much going on outside. Progression kind of sucks for how much of a time sink it is. But
with the
almost done.
So close, though. Yeah, so close.
With whatever we're awesome, what's your guys' raid schedule like?
We raid Sunday through Thursday. We do invites start like 7. So if we get full group then, we generally go. But if not, our start time is 8 and we go to 12:15ish.
Okay.
So it's not that bad.
That's not that bad for US 4th though.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guilds that raid in the weekends.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. What about you, Twin?
Just progression and pondering the deeper questions of Shadow.
Oh my god. We have so many to get into today too.
Yeah, you got unchained from the Simcraft work to come talk to us for 2 hours here, and then I'm sure you'll go back into the cave.
Yes,
Yeah.
I will get burned by blue.
Yeah.
again.
I know that was
I'm looking at you right now.
Yeah, we talked about this computer you have here, and it seems to be pretty much a monster.
Yeah, it was, not to touch on topics later in the show too much, but I got tired of not being able to run Sims all the time and having to stop them whenever I wanted to actually use my computer to, play games. So I built my own 8-core behemoth box that is dedicated to running simulations.
Now, how big of a simulation do you usually run on that? Like, why do you require so much power?
So one of the interesting things about Shadow is there's a lot of different talent combinations that really play into decision making. There's 9 different combinations, and then if you want to try to get a better idea of the different fight types that are out there, one target versus 2 target, or if there's ads, and so you got 9 combinations of talents, 10 combinations of fight types, 3 different kinds if there's ads or no ads or whatever, and then you're running each simulation 25,000 times. What? So it just so you can get a good, solid statistical number.
Yeah, you need a baseline, yeah.
Exactly. And then the way that it works is it has to run those profiles again when you want to determine stat weights. So it ends up being tens of, if not hundreds of millions of total iterations to get the numbers that I then throw in a giant spreadsheet and play with.
That's wild, and I'm sure we'll get a little more on that later. But
yeah.
that's just to describe this computer that you have, because in the pre-show we had yesterday, I was like, why would you need something that big? I didn't touch on it. I wanted to bring it up in the show, but that's why. Because math is hard, kids. But I guess the first big thing we want to talk about here is kind of give you guys a little bit to talk about what you guys do for the community and where you guys came from and how you guys are helping Shadow Priests evolve throughout your tenure here working with raiding in WoW and what you guys have built. So I'll kick it over to Drye first. Like, what do you do for the community?
Lots of stuff.
Well, okay.
Just taking actual theory crafting to a raid at a high-end perspective. So when you have SimCraft, but you need to be able to illustrate it into real-life scenarios, which is a little bit more of the difficult transition to do. So that's kind of what I tend to do. And then I make guides trying to help people on their stats and what to go. I currently have Ask Mr. Robot has done a very, very good job of making sure their algorithm is up to date and very useful. So I have a guide that just recently got published about that and how to use that for Shadow Priest. And then I have another guide about haste and what to do, which we'll probably go into later that Twintop will want to do the whole math about, but we won't want to get into that yet.
Yeah, I was going to jump over to that real quick while you get off of that. The Ask Mr. Robot post I have up right now, I'll transition over to this real quick here. So this is basically a layout of like a BIS list you're working with currently that is based off of you.
It's going to be the one I'm personally going to be going to.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to put spoilers out there for Twintop, but
yeah,
don't worry about it.
We'll get into it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be what I'm going to be going for. Is that best in slot? I'll post it.
Yeah, you have the actual full length, sure. We're looking at it right now, but you want to explain a little more. The one thing I noticed on here that I didn't ask before was that why does it show the belt is not +8'd? Is that just like a bug with Ask Mr. Robot? It says one.
It's possible it's edited wrong, just myself, because I did it right
okay.
before the show was, and I've changed something.
Okay.
How many hundreds of gear combinations in Ask Mr. Robot have you played with?
Well, yeah.
Because there was nothing that I was able to use before Ask Mr. Robot updated their stats. So I had my own Google Doc, and I've pretty much changed it from the multiple different times we've gone through stats and what breakpoint to go through, what we want our stats to be. I've changed a best in slot list, I want to say close to 30 times since...
Wow. Oh my gosh.
It's an insane amount of times I've changed it and edited it, because you have to go through, edit it. My Google Doc, you have to edit every single stat, make sure it's correct. It's a lot of work, and I'm finally happy that we finally have something that we can use that's solid. So, but I've said that many times and ate my words for it. But so let's hope that we finally have something that's good, and yeah.
Well, I know the Shadow Priest community really appreciates y'all's hard work because when I was looking for, I wanted to make sure I was getting exactly the right Shadow Priest to have on the show, and all I kept seeing was like, get Drye and Twintop, get Drye and Twintop. So I know that the work that you do with the best in slot lists is definitely something that gets appreciated. And let's hear from you, Twintop. What is it that you do that makes you such a well-known dude?
So I try to interact with the community as much as I can. First and foremost, I try to. There's a lot of posts and there's a lot of people that help.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's not just Drye and I. I really mean that. I can't stress that enough. There's a lot of people that go into making the community great. Personally, I try to do a bunch of the math. I try to do the theoretical and get at the core results or the core trends that can then be put into practice, like what Drye does. In a lot of ways, I like to think of myself as more of a coach. You know, it's, hey, these are the good strategies. It's up to you to go and execute them, and people are going to find better ways of doing it. So ways that I do that is I make mammoth math posts in various places, on blogs or on different forums, and reference back the results that I've got so other people can look at it and see, well, you made a mistake here, or oh, hey, I never thought about doing that or this. And then I take those results and try to put them together into things like the haste breakpoint card that Drye has in his haste thread, that shows if you want to try to get this many extra ticks out of something, you need to get to this haste level. And combine all that and make just kind of a general best in slot tool so that people have a quick and an easy reference to see, oh, these items, if I have 4-piece, which one's the best off-piece to have? Well, here's all the numbers that feed into making the ranking, and you can figure it out or piece it together, see if an upgrade is really an upgrade or if it's going to be a downgrade, that sort of thing.
The one thing I keep thinking about when we were talking about this is that all of this theory crafting you're doing right now, does it evolve and change each tier, and then how long does it take you to usually like lock it in? Because we have an expansion on the horizon much earlier than we've ever really had before. So like, I don't want you're gonna like, yes, we figured it out, and like BlizzCon happens, they announce the expansion, and no one cares anymore. Like everyone just kind of like waits for the expansion to happen. But like, how does that work with you guys? Do you have like a timeline? Do you like try to get it done as soon as possible, or each tier when it comes out, do you have to like, well, we wait to find all the new gear, all the heroics and the warforged, and how do you like manage that time crunch, because we're kind of on a combustible game?
Right. It's very unique.
It's always a moving target. And that's the huge problem. Classic example is 5.2 with TOT. We got a Shadow Word Pain buff. Well, let me take a step back. There was no Shadow Word Pain buff. And then 5.2 dropped. And we got buffed. And it didn't necessarily invalidate all of the work that we had spent literally weeks doing. But it made it so that it wasn't quite correct. So we had to go back and redo a bunch of work. And then it got removed. So it was like, okay, great. We just wasted all this effort on something that was temporary. Another example is back in January, there was this notion they were trying to implement this thing called that we dubbed the smooth devouring plague, where instead of doing a lot of damage up front and then a little bit on ticks, it would do the same amount on hit and then for each tick. And it was actually a buff. There was all sorts of math and theorycraft on, well, would it be better to use it in this scenario, that scenario? And then they just scrapped it. So it can be challenging. It can be a little frustrating at times, but it's the world that we live in. Things are constantly changing, and balance is always attempting to be achieved.
Yeah, I like the moving target. I like the way that you described it there.
Yeah, it makes sense. I just don't know how frustrating it is, because I just kind of, what we talked about in the show beforehand, like I just wait for like Riot and Purge and the Enhanced Shaman guys to fight all this stuff out at the high level, and then I kind of just like soak it up, then I like utilize it. But for them, as like the theory crafting side of stuff, like must be this huge weight to keep pushing forward. And I guess like the whole point of it is that you obviously get better at the game doing it. You understand the concepts more. I don't want to really go into it, but that's all got to really change when the item squish happens in the expansion. So I'm sure you guys are looking forward to that.
That item squish just needs to happen, like
so badly.
It's
so badly.
There's so many different unique reasons, just at least from a 25-man perspective, there's just so much input lag that I think that Item Squish is going to help. Boss Squish Down is going to help. It really just, it needs to happen. Like, it'd be awesome if it just happened now. 25-man might be actually playable.
Well, I mean, a lot of that, they're coming in, they're fixing small little things like the Stormlash fix and like the Smart Heal fix that are coming in. But then, like, I think for you guys, like a math standpoint to find all this stuff out and why you even have Blowtorch is that your number base right now is just huge. Like, there are so many placeholders now for everything, and there's just from that standpoint, I'm sure you're just waiting to work with smaller numbers. So
it certainly makes it easier to infer meaningful results. There's a senior forum that a lot of people have access to, and we've been talking about, you know, these changes and fixing of bugs in simulation craft, and you know, making results different. And it's gotten to a point where we're kind of splitting hairs over what's best as far as stats go, because it's like, oh man, if I go with this kind of a build, it gives me 5,000 more DPS than this other build, and it's like, okay, well, let's take a step back. When the profiles are doing 330,000 damage, and you're getting another 5,000 out, that's pretty close to statistical noise. If you have a little bit of input lag, you're going to lose more than that over the course of a fight. Does it really matter? Yeah. But it's not apparent because the numbers are just so big.
Yeah, it makes it really difficult to understand what a meaningful difference is when you're... And I've had that experience in SimCraft where I'll sim two different things and there's a 5K difference between them, and 5K feels so big. And then you have to understand that it's just a small percentage of the DPS output that you're looking at, and the numbers are just too large to really get a handle on, just, you know, to get a feel for what they really mean. And I want them all to be smaller. I don't know if it's going to help with input lag or what, because I don't know what's going to help with input lag. Something has to. But as far as the item squish goes, I think it's long overdue. I would have liked to have seen them do it this expansion.
Yeah, I think really when they were talking about the item squish and the onset of it, they knew they had to, but they needed more time, honestly. So, and especially because they wanted to put in another difficulty this expansion, and now like the item jump from like LFOic, like BIS is such a huge canyon now. They wanted to get that implemented first to know what the power gain is to the 4 steps, and of course they have normal dungeons to heroic dungeons to scenarios with that, and heroic scenarios now, right? So they have all these little steps, and they have to make sure when they squish everything before the new expansion, when you're leveling new characters, I guess they needed to make sure that you still feel like you gain power. It's not like not like gaining power at all until you get to max level. So there's a lot of little things I'm sure they're working on, but...
Well, let's move along to the history of Shadow Priests, because I remember when I was talking to Drye before the show that he has always played a Shadow Priest, even when maybe you shouldn't have played a Shadow Priest, and that you've been really committed to being a Shadow Priest. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about sort of the history of Shadow and when you guys first became utilized a lot more often in raids, and how that worked out.
I've pretty much always been one, regardless if it was efficient or not. I believe it was 1.4 was the patch where we finally started getting coefficients that were useful and having us become that mana battery, which is what they did. I believe that's when you had VE or VT up, you get the mana regen back, was when that patch finally went in. But I remember pretty much, I believe it was it Noth that has the skeleton spawn on that one side. Like, literally all I did for that entire fight was Shackle. That was my damage, was Shackle. So it's come a long way. We've gone from being almost a completely useless, literally like a support class in vanilla, to all we did was support and gave mana regen back. But you could shine. Like, if you had a good DPS rotation and you were a good player, you gave a ton of mana back, and it was very clear that you were wanted and for that reason.
Yeah.
So you at least had, like, hey, I feel very useful. I'm the only one that really brings this ability. It's just a very unique thing that we had back then in Burning Crusade. Then they took it out with 2.4? I think it was when they took out our passive damage equaled mana return type thing, and then we became more of a damage class. Like we were viable. Like I believe on Brutalis was the first time I ever saw like my mind blasted a ton of damage, and I finally got over like 3k DPS now, which obviously seems like a very very minute number, but has become back then it was huge. Like 3k on Brutalis is pretty strong for Shadow.
Absolutely,
like
sure.
So it's gone from right around that turning point was when we started seeing like, hey, they're finally realizing. I believe that was kind of the turning point for a lot of other classes. Like that was when Boomkin started becoming viable. Elemental Shaman started becoming viable. Not necessarily viable, but like able to be used in like actual raids. And then we got into the whole Wrath part where we started doing damage. We weren't that good during Next 25, but we were all right. But then we went to Uljwar where we could just multi-dot everything, and that's probably the first times we actually saw Shadow doing well. Is you could just multi-dot everything, and it was like the whole scumbag patter. It was like one of my favorite instances because I'm a huge patter, but like you just dot everything. That's probably why I think Spoils is such a fun fight for me personally. But so you had that whole Uljwar where you just dot everything. It was nice. You saw yourself like on the meters, like you didn't have to scroll down to see it.
I know that feeling.
Yeah, and then you got to what was it? The tournament, and our DPS was just
forget about that.
Terrible.
That in general,
like that whole instance, I had to play my alt for that. Admittedly, I finally switched to my mage. I had to play it for a little bit, but it was rough. I'm pretty sure the only fight that we were actually good for was Nubrak because of VE. And the whole passive, we could keep our group up. We didn't need extra heals, and we could just self-sufficient our group. It was nice. And then once ICC came around, they gave us the whole dot scaling with haste and turned us finally into a very efficient DPS class.
So and then came the age of Shadow Priests.
Yeah, and then we finally became like a usable, viable class. Like we could be going, we'd actually do DPS, we'd fight, and actually do the damage. And then we went to Kata where they had the whole new mastery system in, and which personally was my favorite time of Shadow.
Of course, Kata was your favorite time of Shadow.
Kata was the first time Shadow. Well, not the first time, but it was like Shadow was really strong in Kata. Like you would always be top 3 almost on every fight. Like you just did an absurd amount of damage. It was great. I believe there was one day where our mastery, like the actual passive mastery back then, which was just like a damage increase for like shadow damage. And then you had like the actual mastery stat, but the passive mastery like was through the roof. It was like 35%, and like instantly within like 4 hours of like that being released on like live realms, it got nerfed. Like it just hit the nerf bat, it's gone, see ya. But so it was really nice to have it for like those 4 hours while you're raiding. But Shadow Priests were very, very strong in Kata. We did a lot of damage, and just overall it was very useful. And now with the whole mop generation, we've gone more so back to a support class with our level 90 abilities in VE. VE is now like a very, very strong raid cooldown, especially if you have like Insanity, Devouring Plague, and you hit it right then. It does a ton of healing. And then Divine Star and Halo, both themselves, like there's not going to be a way in the current talent system having those talents and the amount of just an insane amount of healing that they do that where our damage is ever going to be like a warlock or rogue or a mage like it is right now. There's no way. They just can't do it because you'd only want Shadow Priest then.
Yeah.
So it kind of sucks, but we're at a mediocre point where we're average at everything other than like movement and single target where we're pretty poor. But for the most part, we're in all right situation right now. Personally, I'd rather just swap the support role for just full damage, but you've got to have classes like that in your raid.
Well, I mean, I think there's differences in how they design classes and how they keep them. Like with the last patch with Siege of Orgrimmar, they nerfed my off healing so much. I played Enhanced Shaman, and because they wanted to make sure we still had damage viability, they didn't want to make sure we were like the jack of all trades where we could, because they gave us AoE back. So they didn't want to give us our AoE back and keep us with the strong healing, so they nerfed our healing away, right? So I guess I'll take that, right? Because until this patch, Enhancement AoE has been nothing. You never wanted to AoE as Enhancement Shaman unless you got like a bajillion flame shocks, and it wasn't worth the damn. So I feel that I understand that argument is that if they were to like tone down your healing though to give you more damage, I don't know, you would lose a bit of a niche that you guys fill right now too though, with how well like having 1 or 2 in a raid is helpful, I guess, because it kind of I feel like they pair well with Enhancement Shamans because we have AG, which is an on-demand burst healing cooldown. We usually time those up with VEs, and that's a huge boost to the healing core. So yeah, I don't know if you'll ever get rid of all of your utility though to be like a warlock, because they're a pure. Let's 6.0 here start chanting. Yeah, it's an interesting situation you guys have right now.
Well, what's more interesting is that the community in general, and the greater WoW community, not just Shaman or Priest or whomever, they care about big numbers. They care about, oh, I'm doing a lot of damage, or oh, I'm taking lots of hits without a lot of heals, or I'm single-handedly keeping up a lot of people. They don't see the need or have a desire really for there to be true hybrid support classes as part of a raid like there are in other games.
Not yet.
Well,
not yet.
I don't know if that's going to be coming. I don't know how the general WoW community would respond to it either.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that Blizzard has kind of backed themselves into a corner where it's very cookie cutter, and if one part of that is not performing up to the same level as everybody else, they're going to complain. They're going to be heard. Whether or not anything is changed is another story entirely. But it doesn't seem like they're very open to it, the community, that is.
Yeah. I don't know what's got to happen with that, because people like either love to play like a support role, like a bard or whatever have you, but I don't know if it fits into World of Warcraft.
No, I think they missed the boat on that a long time ago. It's just not where WoW's going. That's not what the community wants. At least it doesn't seem to be what the community wants. And even the people who say they want it, it's not always the greatest feeling ever. I know that I played a bit of Final Fantasy XIV before I had to go back to raiding pretty seriously in WoW, and everyone was all pumped about the support class that Final Fantasy XIV has real support classes, and it's basically just a DPS class with like a minus 20% on how much damage you're putting out in exchange for buffs for the group, which is a cool feeling. But I just don't think that you could get away with that in WoW. I don't think the game would be better for it either. I think that the bigger problem is the proliferation of support of like raid cooldowns and support and utility. And utility abilities. Every class has them right now, so it's not like Shadow Priests are the only ones who bring the Shadow Priest flavored stuff. It's not like y'all are the only people who bring support to the raid.
Yeah.
Pretty much everyone does at this point, so there's no excuse for y'all to be putting out less DPS.
Anna, you went robot on us. What happened?
I did.
Beep boop.
A little bit of robot on us toward the middle there. Yeah.
Every time I start talking, it's like clockwork.
I don't know what happened. I don't know. It's weird. I don't know what. We've been fine this whole time. I'm not sure. But, yeah, so I guess I'll bring part of this question back over here to you then, Twin, because I think Drye just broke down the entire timeline. He almost did the entire topic himself. So then... No, it's totally okay. So I guess, how have you guys felt in your playtime with Shadow Priest that like Blizzard treats your class? Like where do you think you guys fit in to the hierarchy? Like, are you good where you are now, or do you still need fixes? I know we have a question later on that really goes into like what you would change, but like I know that you guys have changed a lot over the course of the expansion humps. Like, I mean, I have too. Like, Enhancement Shaman wasn't a thing until Burning Crusade, and then it was kind of a thing, but now it's like a thing with Cataclysm and now into Mop. But like what all do you break down what you guys actually bring to raids so everyone knows what Shadow Priests actually do for us right now?
Well, presently, we bring decent damage and spread damage. That's become one of our primary top damage sources if there's a lot of targets. And so that's the obvious. That's how can you get big numbers? Yay. But there's also the aspect of a little bit of crowd control through silence. We're actually tapped to use it a little bit in Siege.
Nazgrim,
Nazgrim, Shaw, to bring the big ads into
there you go.
the rest
Yeah.
of the raid because it'll
Yeah.
stop them from casting. Life grips, as trolly as they may be, can be very helpful.
Yeah.
Or can destroy a raid roster. The obvious ones are, other obvious ones really are the off healing. Through Divine Star, if you're all stacked up, you can just, it's basically a self health stone every 15 seconds. And you can hit anybody in a line or anybody that's stacked up. It's very overpowered. And Vampiric Embrace as a healing raid cooldown that up until now wasn't very potent in 25 men at least, but thankfully it's been fixed. Outside of that, maybe a little bit of mana regen if you're willing to sacrifice some personal DPS and cast Hymn of Hope. But I know that there's a lot of Shadow players, especially now that it doesn't restore your own mana, it prioritizes healers. They just say, screw you, I'm not going to waste 3 or 4 globals so that you can help keep the rest of the raid alive.
Yeah.
Is there anything glaring that I'm missing, Drye?
Sorry, I have my mic muted because people like mowing their lawns. Not really. Personally, I am a greedy Shadow Priest, so Life Grip is a waste of GCD for me. But it is useful in some situations, so... But no, you hit it all on the head.
Chat is pointing out a couple of actually glaring, obvious ones that I missed. Void Tendrils can be very handy.
Void Tendrils,
for,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
CC. And Life Swap, if you know how to properly time it.
Yeah, the Void Shift. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I don't even know what that tooltip looks like. I have yet to take it out of my spellbook. I'm
What
dead
the heck?
serious.
You don't know.
I don't have it. It's wasted GCD. You die, it's your fault.
Oh my god.
And then, of course, Mass Dispels for
Mass
clearing,
Dispels.
saving healers' mana. Basically, it's a lot of those kind of pseudo healer jobs. Off healing, dispelling, or doing offensive dispels, and restoring mana or saving mana.
Yeah.
Which, if you look at it, we're priests. Kind of makes sense that that's what our off spec or off not main primary utility would be.
Yeah, I guess that makes a lot of sense too, because that I guess once you break it all down to how many little tools and kits and things you have, that really comes in handy. Because I don't know, like, totems have been neutered for shamans, right? Like, we have like a raid cooldown totem with Stormlash, but even like that with the new change is kind of like meh. Then our healing is nerfed as enhancement, and like unless you're an actual healer, we're talking about like the DPS classes having utility based on the main one because we're hybrid. That's incredible how much you guys have, because I know we massed a spell on Thok, which is what we're currently working on now because of the poison debuff. Or whatever it is. It's not poison because it's magic. Whatever. Okay, Blizzard. And it's crazy to think about, though, and then all the different little things you guys have in your kit right now, which it's fun for hybrids, but I think priests have tons now that we're talking about it.
We do, and one of the issues that arises from that is the PvP implications of having all of this arsenal of tools in your toolkit. And another common theme throughout all of MoP has been the nerfing of utility in the name of PvP balance, except there hasn't been a lot returned to Shadow specifically in the PvE realm. Now, that's a different conversation than was there too much utility in 5.0 versus now. And that is up for debate. All we know is it's lower than it was, or it's more restricted than it was originally.
Yeah. I'm going to bring camera over to myself real quick. We're going to have Anna reconnect to the call because we're having technical difficulties behind the scene. So do what you got to do. It's not going to mess up the show. I'll just sit here and entertain if you want to do that.
Okay.
Okay. Right. Do what you got to do. We'll get this all set up. You just click the call button back and we'll be all set. Live shows always kind of have this stuff. It's okay. Well, you guys can look at Pikachu. He's passed out. He had a busy weekend. I don't know what he was doing. I don't pay attention to him because he comes alive when I go to bed. So it's
is this any better?
Brave little toaster thing. I'm waiting for it to buffer. You're still You're still what's that artwork
Pixel.
style? Yeah, you're still pixelated.
Still an 8-bit Anna is what the chat is calling me.
8-bit Anna, which means the
It's
audio
a
sounds
dark
fine.
Anna.
It's just the video. Something's going on
well.
with the internets.
We'll
right
keep
now.
going with the show, and I'll figure it out.
This
Yeah.
broadcast brought to you by Real Networks. Buffering.
Buffering.
Yeah, I know, right?
So I guess the next little topic to bring up here then is things to talk about in MOP going on. And the two major things that we have as notable ones, we had Twist of Fate brought up, and then Shadow Orbs. So do you want to talk about Shadow Orbs, or do you want to talk about Twist of Fate, or how do you want to...
I'll do Shadow Orbs.
Do Shadow Orbs? All right.
'Cause I despise the mechanics so much. We talked about this last night. Shadow has a lot of mechanics that they've introduced in MOP that other classes had in Kata, and they're not the fixed versions.
Yeah.
They're the crappy, we needed to fix these, so we'll give them to a different class, but fix them, but not fix them for the other class. Like, for the Holy Power, they now have 5, we have 3, so we can't, like, bank them if we ever need to, like, nuke a target. Like, for example, just for Siegecrafter on the belt, if you're going up on the belt, you only get Divine Plague unless you get Lucky Procs with DI. So it's a really poor mechanic that other classes have had fixed to, but for some reason we don't have fixes to. But that also brings up the whole conversation with having Shadow Orbs on the start of a poll.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to discuss this now, but...
Nope, go for it.
Okay.
Go
Shadow
for it.
is 2 completely different specs when you have orbs on the pull. Like, the amount of damage with all your trinkets procced and Insanity is an insane amount. Like, especially if you lust. And we'll peak very high for like 10 seconds that we have those abilities synergized together, then we'll shoot right back down. But the extra amount of damage, like, it could easily be the difference between having a 1% kill or a 1% wipe and a 0% kill on a progression. Like, it's really stupid that we don't have a mechanic or some gimmicky thing like just a target dummy that can place and use to get orbs, something like that. We need something like that. Like, Druids have astral communication that allows them to fix that ability, but we don't have it now. It really makes you wonder what's going on at Blizzard sometimes.
It feels kind of like it is an archaic version of Soul Shards rather, for Warlocks, and now all the classes have their own either resource or their own way to get them before pull, so they go into a pull fresh with all their Soul Shards. Whereas back in the day, you had to like wait for trash or go outside the instance to like drain souls and come back in, right? We all had to deal with that with Warlocks back in the day. And that feels like that's the only thing that I can think of in the game right now, like you guys talking about, with that has that sort of like, we're awesome or we're not, based on this outside mechanic built into our class that we really can't control unless we're doing damage, but we can't do it when we start a fight. But then like, it's a huge convoluted thing, so...
Oh, Feather was like that for several classes, for DKs and for Paladins, especially once they started screwing with RPPM. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Once they started messing with RPPM trinkets, a Feather proc was exactly like that, because for DKs to get their Fester Blight up, it's for classes that have snapshotting mechanics, and for DKs it's their dots. And for Ret Paladins, it's Execution Sentence. And if you get an Execution Sentence off when that Feather's all stacked up, then your DPS is going to look way better. And for DKs, I'm not as familiar with it, but the same kind of thing applies, is that they want their dots up with feathers stacked all the way up. And so once all the RPPM stuff started getting all tricky, whether it was going to proc on the pull, whether it wasn't going to proc on the pull, whether it was going to proc, but it was going to proc outside of all of your cooldowns, it started getting really, really frustrating. So I know those pull frustrations. I mean, it's different than what y'all have with the Shadow Orb thing, but swings on the pull are just incredibly frustrating for any DPS class, because you feel like there's really nothing you can do about it. And I had that in Kata with certain procs in my class, and then you feel like you have to wait for that lucky pull to do the best that you can, and it's really irritating.
To put in perspective what Drye was getting at, it takes, best case, no Divine Insight procs. Okay, so assume you've got Twist of Fate or Power Infusion, some other talent. It will take, best case, 17 seconds for you to get 3 orbs, and then another GCD to cast Devouring Plague, and then you've got 6 GCDs, well, 6 seconds rather, I'm thinking from being GCD capped for haste. To actually use Mindfully Insanity, if that's your chosen tier 3 talent, when you're getting 20 seconds in, even 15 seconds into a pull, any short-lived procs like Jade Spirit, which is only 12 seconds, or the legendary Meta Gem for us, which is a 10-second proc, those are already gone by the time you can get your first burst out. And that there, versus having everything up, if you go in with 3 orbs, is a major source of the problem. I absolutely agree with Drye. It's an issue that we've been saddled with, and it's making the best we can.
Yeah, that seems like definitely something they have on the chopping block to get fixed, because I just think a very clunky mechanic, where it's almost like not fun for the player at all to have this resource you have to manage that you either... Like, I use Chesticles, the Shadow Priest in our guild, one of the officers, is an example, because Enhancement Shamans are probably the highest bursting class in the game currently, depending on the fight, and depending on how close you are in proximity to the boss when you start. But either I see Chesty on the top 7, like he's close to a million DPS burst, or he's just nowhere there. I just don't ever see him. So I don't know if he has them going into certain polls or not. Other times, last year was more prevalent, he would be first, and then he would just plummet down. And it was so weird because no other class did that. Like, if you start out really high, you usually stay kind of consistent. But Shadow Priest is either there or they're not. And that must be super frustrating for you guys, because I don't know how do you deal with that going into each fight, right? Like, that's... Ugh.
It build orbs on target dummies.
Antidepressants, generally.
You kill all the trash by Malkorok so that you can build up orbs before that fight, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
disappointed that the target dummies despawn on reset if you've already killed Malkorok.
Oh, they do? Oh, that's a bummer.
That's too bad.
I guess I mentioned trinkets, and this is going to show how little I know about Shadow Priests. But are y'all dependent on any particular trinkets? Are there any crazy trinkets that have changed your playstyle through MOP?
Unerring.
Unerring?
God, that trinket was the worst thing that it's either like your best friend or like your like murderous ex. Like, it's probably the best way to put it. Like, they're either it's either they're procking all the time. You start procking the start of the pull. It's great. You do a ton of DPS, or it just doesn't proc and you're just sitting there like, are you gonna do something? Like, work, please. But like the difference, like the range between DPS like in TOT was just absurd because of that trinket. It's so stupid.
We're talking about the unerring vision of Lei Shen, right? That's what we're talking
about.
It gives you 100% crit for 4 seconds, and you generally want to, like, if you can, like, if you have it proc with 3 orbs, like, it does so much damage. It's ridiculous.
Nice.
Yeah, it was such a game-changing trinket for Shadow. In fact, it dictated a gearing strategy for all of Tier 15. Wow. Because it synergized so well with our 2-piece Tier 15 bonus, in that so the 2-piece bonus is Shadowy Apparitions have a 65% chance to increase the duration of Shadow Word Pain and Vampiric Touch on the target when they hit. So how do you get Shadowy Apparitions? You get them from Shadow Word Pain crits. What does Unerring Vision do? It gives you a 100% chance to crit for the initial duration of the dot. So you get Unerring Vision proc, throw Shadow Word Pain on all the targets, and then you gain GCDs from not having to refresh your dots.
Okay.
And even with that, it changed gearing priority because to be able to leverage the 2-piece bonus, it was favoring crit. But if you have a proc every minute and a half or 2 minutes, on average, that is going to give you 100% crit, any crit that you have from gear or on your profile is going to go wasted during that time. And since that's the largest driving factor for gaining your extra GCDs to do other things with, it made more sense to just gear mastery.
Ugh. That sounds so... That's like a Rube Goldberg machine, right? To like even do your mechanics. This does this, that goes back to this, that works on that, that does this. And that, oh man, I just hit F3 and I blow stuff out. That's all I do. And that seems so convoluted that you guys have to deal with all those rigmaroles to do what you have to do. That's frustrating.
Melee life, Bae. The melee life.
The melee life. Hashtag melee life.
It's pretty good.
Oh, we had a little discussion the other day on Thok, where our Red Leader tech was kind of giving a jab in the ribs to the melee, and how easily they have it in like all of the stuff in this tier. Which we talked about how like tier 16 is like melee friendly fights and melee unfriendly fights back and forth. So range dominant or range not dominant, and it's funny how it's like Apple and PC in that argument. You either are like pro one because you play it and like con the other, or pro one. It's so funny how that works out. Unless you play both, and then you just don't care, and then you might not even feel for either side of the team. But that's still a frustrating thing. But is there anything else about this topic we have to go through before anything else that we missed here?
You know, Amp Trinket is pretty
yeah, there we go.
Because it not only increases the haste rating, mastery rating, critical strike, damage, which until you get to 100% crit is basically equivalent to getting more crit rating in end goal. But Shadow also benefits from the increased spirit, which means increased hit, which means between that and if you're a human and you have the human 3% extra spirit from being a human, and then expertise from holding different weapons, and being able to gem expertise now, and sometimes it complicates getting to hit cap, but it frees up more secondary stats for yay big numbers.
Yeah, that's the one thing I wanted to make sure we touch on here. That everyone's on the same page with this. I put the way the raid bot at Mr. Robot like spreadsheet here, but just so everyone knows, expertise and hit are the same stat pretty much. And so why is it?
Everyone knows that.
Well, why is it that Shadow Priests, is there no gem that gives you hit and the stats you want, or like why do you go expertise?
Isn't expertise
So-
red?
Yes.
Well, the new way of
Go ahead, Drye.
Okay, sorry. Well, the new way of gearing is our secondary stats have scaled so well due to the fact that, like, doing the best in slot list, we can get GCD cap and almost have full mastery cap. That's
100%.
18,000 haste and 23,000 mastery. Like, the amount of stats we have when we're 581 island level is just completely absurd. So in order to do that, Int's still valuable, but you get it passively on gear. So the amount of bonus damage, like DPS per stat you gain from mastery and from crit and haste, is scaled much higher. So the 80 int on gems has been surpassed by the 160 int that it would, or 160 expertise, which is equivalent to hit. So you gain more secondary stats out of it, which is a higher DPS increase.
Oh, yep. Okay.
The changing of gems in MOP from before, where they secondary stats are 2 times a primary stat, has had a huge gearing impact, and I think has been not a giant contributor, but certainly a contributor to being able to get to 100% mastery and 50% haste for Shadow if you really went all in.
Yeah.
It's just absurd the amount of secondary stats that are available now.
Yeah, Rhett's in a similar boat, and I remember my raid leader made a comment last week that was like, oh, I had asked for an expertise gem, and he was like, oh, you're gemming expertise now? But it's because it's more effective than gemming haste strength or mastery strength to gem expertise, and then you get to reforge into more stats. So.
Yeah, I guess that's the one thing too. When they made the colors of the gems, when they changed the colors of the gems going into this expansion, correct? If I'm not mistaken, like what stats are on what colors.
I think it was Wrath to Kata because they got rid of Armor Pen.
Oh yeah, okay. Do you think they planned, or do they have? Does it feel weird? Because I know expertise has always been a melee stat, but now when they made it double dip and it's both the same, do you think that was a planned move for casters to gem expertise?
No.
the headshake
No.
star.
I think the whole reason they did it was enhancement shamans. When, to be honest, like when enhancement shamans would gain and DKs would gain, the hit conversion would just be better for them. Correct. It's obviously worked out. I mean, we can't speculate exactly to what they were thinking, but it's definitely helped out a lot of people. Because I know mages do it, warlocks do it. Pretty much everyone gems expertise at this point, just because of how much raw DPS you gain from your secondary stats. So. It was even more awkward when, was it Trolls and Orc could gain bonus. They got the 1% expertise from having a wand. That was even more of a bigger wrench. Just throw it right in there.
What is that?
Yeah, trolls and warlocks. I don't know if it was both of them, but I know it was trolls. Got 1% expertise for having a wand equipped, which is almost the same as the Alliance Rachels, where humans get the 1% for mace, gnomes get daggers or something like that. So
Maces
it
and
was just our
swords for
equivalent,
humans.
but yeah.
That's so awkward. I don't even. So yeah, we'll probably see gems change again in the in 6.0 because that seems like a weird design philosophy in that regard. And they kind of like you guys found it out like in tier 15 basically, right? That's when you guys really went that way.
No, this is, well, we've known about expertise
Uh-huh.
since beta.
Yeah.
Because if you're a human and you have a mace, it gives you 1% hit because they get 1% expertise. Same goes for dwarves if they
Yes.
have a mace, and gnomes if they have a dagger.
That seems like it's so. Is that I don't know if they planned it that way at all for casters to
think they
gain
did.
all that passivity off of a weapon type. I mean, if that was like communicated and it was like part of the game, that'd be cool. It's like a neat interaction with like, but that's also limiting because not all casters types can use those types of weapons. You need to gain those. That doesn't seem right. Yeah, that seems like a whoops-a-doozle. But yeah, we'll see if that gets fixed in 6.0. But to move on from that and to talk real quickly here about some people that are really important to everyone here at Final Boss and what helped make this show great and continue to grow and bring on awesome guests. We're going to go right over here to first and foremost, if you guys need more community stuff and you want to learn all about, they had great coverage of the Siege of Orgrimmar from all corners of the globe, manaflask.com. Manaflask.com is awesome. There's us right there at the top. But they have the Siege of Orgrimmar stuff. They have the Paragon interview. Where's the banner for it? The artwork they do on is amazing. They go Buzzkill's lair, and it's not rotating. There we go. But they had an interview with Paragon, and the thing that I heard about Paragon is they don't really do a lot of media stuff very often. So this is probably a pretty big deal for them to talk about all of the 10-man raiding and the heroic side of things. But they have tons of different notes, different streams, different languages. They've got the main streams over here, German ones down here. They've got videos down here, which is basically just us right now. They've got some extra ones down here, different languages, but they cover a whole lot of community-oriented World of Warcraft news from not only like a media site kind of deal. They do very much community interaction thing, and you guys can go check out manaflask.com for all that goodness. We've also got, I am going to jump the gun on this because we haven't officialized it outside of some communication online, but I don't care. Totemspot.com. I get to rep the community that I've been a part of now for years. Totemspot.com is a multifaceted forum outlet for Elemental, Resto, and Enhancement Shamans, and everything in the Totempedia. You can go over here and go to, there's great resources. There are forums, macros, and strings for, the different people that run the Elemental Enhancement and Restoration sides to really get you guys into everything Shaman. Totemspot is an awesome resource for that. And then, of course, there's us. FinalBoss.tv is our website. Everything we do is going up and gets thrown up on there. The stream is live from there. You can actually watch all the episodes there from there as well. Recently, we just finally got all the audio-only versions in the podcast form, which are on the website. They are also on iTunes. You can just search us on iTunes, just FinalBossTV. And then you can actually subscribe to our podcast right there. Cast and crew information is here. Also, you can ask us questions for episodes in the future, ask a boss, or be a guest if you think you want to come on the show in the future. If you're a community interactive person, you have something to offer to the Final Boss side of things and how we want to talk to community-oriented people, go submit a little resume thing there to be a guest. And then also, to help us grow, we put up this awesome little donation button right here, which, $1, $2, $200, $2,000. We have lots of upgrades that are in the works here now, too. We're bringing swag and stuff to BlizzCon for you guys, but audio and video back-end stuff is definitely all about growing the show and making a better product for you guys. And then one last thing is this is our YouTube page. We're at 1474 subscribers. You know how I talked about a little earlier today that the way for us to get partnered on Twitch is probably going to be through YouTube. You should guys go over there and subscribe and help us grow on YouTube. And the beta test thing we're trying out later tonight actually does involve with YouTube, so stick around for that. But again, the bigger we get over there, the better we get on the quality on Twitch, because getting partnered on Twitch now is really difficult because of their new stipulations on that. So it's all about you guys. We do the show for you guys. Without our mobs and minions, our instance would be nothing. It'd be empty room. So, that's enough about me, enough about us. I think Anna came back and is here again, and we still have 8-bit Anna, which is fine. I think it's trending on Twitter.
All right, that's cool. It's retro. I did it on purpose. Man.
Oh, you did it on purpose. It matches the Mega Man. You're totally right. There we go. She's trying to blend in.
I know, right?
Yeah. I think it should. You sound fine though, which is the weirdest thing. Because if your Skype was lagging, then you would like sound different, but you don't. So.
Well,
I don't know.
Right along.
Yep. Let's move right along into the. Oop, where did it go? I just deleted something. I don't know what happened. What just happened?
I think we're looking at single target DPS.
Yep, we're looking at single target DPS and the meat and potatoes of the show. So when you guys get to your screenshots, definitely tell me which ones you need. But
all right.
You want to... You can go ahead, Anna. I was interrupting you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, you know, we just want to hear a little bit more about how Shadow Priests deal with single target encounters. I know there's been a lot of talk about how that's one of the things that y'all are less good at, but I'll let y'all go into that. You know, what kinds of talents that you use, how you approach a single target encounter. Would love to hear some details from y'all regarding that.
Do you want to pull up the screenshots I have so we can kind of do a walkthrough?
I've got them right here. You just tell me which one you want.
Audio-visual aids.
The first one, let's go with... Where is it? That one first, where it's just the overall ranking.
If you're linking them in order, are you going from top to bottom?
Yeah, just go from top to bottom. That's
gotcha,
fine.
sir. Gotcha, sir. All right, go for it.
All right, so like you can see how poor Shadow tends to do in comparison to other players. I believe if it was counted towards a rank, I know a lot of other people aren't currently ranking because logs are private, but that is like, I believe it's 8th or something out of all the Shadow Priests, and as you can see, we're pretty happy they're down at the bottom.
This is Malkarok Heroic, by the way,
yes,
which is
sorry, I forgot to.
Which is like the closest thing to a patchwork fight we have.
Yeah.
So yes.
And I'm just using that as an example because of how low people can get. You can use both DI and Twist of Fate. In my personal log, I tend to choose DI just because the synergy between that and Mind Flay Insanity is very, very strong. And it's generally, like, if you go to the next screenshot, where it's a breakdown of all my abilities, you can see that Mind Flay Insanity and Devouring Plague are my 2 highest dealing damages just because of DI. And it just does an absurd amount of damage. And then you go to... But I did have some pretty decent procs. If you go to the third screenshot, you can see all the procs. I don't know if you want to layer the two. The next 2 are kind of together. But you can see I had a pretty nice uptime on Breath of the Hydra, which is the haste trinket with a 10-second proc. That has roughly a 33% uptime, which is pretty high. And if you look at the 4th screenshot, you can see that a lot of my trinkets tend to line up fairly well.
Yeah, not bad.
You can use the whole Devouring Plague and Insanity together while those are up, if you get lucky enough. And the amount of int scaling with trinkets do is just an absurd amount of damage. It's really nice. But even with those scaling as well as they do, and doing as much damage as they do, you can go back to the first screenshot and see I'm getting beat by a Death Knight tank.
This is all the same fight too, by the way, guys. This is all from the same bite. Yeah, and this is, you averaged out at effectively 308k DPS with all of this lining up. And these are screenshots because our logs are private, so the formatting doesn't work all the time. But I mean, these are all his lineups with his trinkets, right? So like these are like the big chunks of damage that lined up, and then obviously all the procs he had. But then yeah, that's Now,
Drye, did you have 3 orbs on this poll?
I did have 3 orbs on this poll.
You did?
Okay,
that's the question.
That's something to keep in mind here is look at how low he is on the overall DPS ranking with 3 orbs. When you're doing progression, you're not going to have that. You're just going to end up being lower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's even worse.
Because you never know what's going to be a kill, is what you're alluding to, right? You never know what pull's going to be a kill. Exactly. Huh. Yeah, I don't know. That's so. I mean, and I would assume that your gear disparity in WWA isn't huge. Like you're not like towering above the people you're below, or like way behind.
I personally have kind of a lower. the first week of progression,
Yeah.
I wasn't really expecting, or the first day of progression anyway, I wasn't really expecting us to go 6 of 14, but apparently we did go PTR testing.
Mm-hmm.
But I went to Imagine Dragon concert, so I kind of lost a lot of opportunity for loot.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit lower,
Priorities.
and I'm still using a 543 trinket from TOT, so
Okay.
that's not as optimal. Obviously, I'd like it to be, but it's still. I mean, the trinket had fairly nice uptime, so that kind of balanced it out itself
Yeah,
out.
I know. Looking at it, though, this kind of feels like I'd have to pull up some logs from us, but like again, if I ever see Chesty doing really well, he'll stay doing really well and then just fall off. So like I usually only have the top 7 viewed on my SCADA during raids, but it's very rare that I see him at like, the top upper crust right there. And this is a big important thing. Look at the top class right now. That's a warlock.
Oh, surprise!
Surprise, shocker.
Shocker!
Yeah,
Yeah.
spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's pretty amazing that even with all of their nerf they've just had too, like they're still. When's this kill? What's the date on this? It's just like the other day,
This
right?
was this week. This was
Yeah,
this
this is
week.
the-
Bill.
Yep, this
So
is
it's
the
with all
10th.
their nerfs in.
Nurse
But
girl.
it's nice because originally they were a huge outlier. Like
Yeah.
they're way above everyone. Now at least they're still the top, but they're still like within like a much smaller margin.
They're
It's more
catchable.
Balanced, like,
Yeah.
but Smash
Yeah.
is really good, so he does a lot of damage.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, and player skill. We're not like talking about player skill or punch, throwing jabs here. We're just looking at raw data as an example here. So, and then I guess to backtrack a little bit here, what is we talk about here with we have a note on here with DI and insanity. What is insanity? What does that mean? And then what does DI do? you guys?
Insanity is a level, I think it's 45. Let me double check real
Yeah,
quick.
level 45.
45 talent. Basically, what it does is whenever you use your Shadow Orbs and have Divine Plague up, your Mind Flay turns into like a super powered Mind Flay, which is called Mind Flay Insanity. It does 100% increased damage depending on the amount of orbs because it goes off that. So the more DI procs you have, and Divine Insight is what DI is,
Yes.
it basically allows you to get free Mind Blast casts that are instant from your Shower Pain ticks. And so
Oh, wow,
they
okay.
synergize very well together. Like you get more DI procs, which means you have more Shadow Orbs, which means you have more Devouring Plague uptime, which means you have more Insanity time. So all of those, like the step, just kind of synergized. They just do it very well.
Interesting. And Twin, what do you want? I just interrupted you.
Oh, no. Drye nailed all of it. That's,
Okay.
It's just, especially, and I know we're talking single target right now, but if
Yes.
you have multiple targets, or if you have higher mastery, because for those not familiar, Shadow's mastery is on anything that is a damage over time spell. So Shadowed Pain, Vampiric Touch, Devouring Plague, and Mind Flay and Mind Sear are considered dots by the game. Anytime they do damage, there is X% that they will do damage a second time. And it'll be exactly the same, except they can crit independently from one another. But those
okay.
mastery procs have a chance to proc Divine Insight or its partner in crime equivalent from Darkness Comes Light from Vampiric Touch. So having Shadowed Pain out on a lot of targets, if you're really trying to pump damage into one specific target, a priority target, helps with Mind Flay Insanity.
Yeah. So just to go on before Anna takes the next topic, when you see these cross dotting fights that you think, oh, they're just padding or whatever, it actually does usually impact their main target damage. Just to clear the air a bit on that. I know sometimes you just pad on fights just to pad when you don't have to do it. But, like what Twintop just said, it can directly impact how much damage they do to one target as well. And it almost feels like you have to do this, don't you?
Oh, absolutely.
And especially on Paragons, because that's just
Yeah.
what we did.
Yeah.
Paragons is 3 targets for the main portion of it, and that's exactly where DI is, like, it's very overpowered. Is when it's 3 targets, and you have Shower Pain up on all of them, and using DI. 3 targets is you'll have the most possible DPS increase on your one single target because of having 3 total. So that's like the medium best point to have is the 3 targets. Is anything more is padding, anything less is you're being bad.
And any more than 3, if you have to maintain Shadow or Pain on those targets, are removing GCDs that you could be pumping into your primary target.
There you go.
So what I'm hearing here is that Twintop and Drye just gave Shadow Priests permission to pad up to 3 targets. I like this. I like this.
We'll go with that.
Yeah.
No, I understand how that works. It gives you guys more procs. So let's talk about AE fights then, since you went into that a little bit. Just what kind of tactics you use on an AE encounter. Spoils, for example, I know is the one that a bunch of us are pretty familiar with recently. Yeah. What kind of stat weights, whether they change on an AE-based encounter, whether you change any talents or glyphs for those fights.
So, really, because we have, well, we actually have 3 different talent tiers that we can choose from that directly impact DPS.
Huh.
There's the level 45, which is tier 3, which has either From Darkness Comes Light, which is your vampiric touches. When they tick, they have a 20% chance to allow you to cast an instant Mind Spike that will not remove dots, which it normally will when you hard cast it, and will do 50% more damage. Okay, so it's, you know, having those, just in this example, if there's a lot of movement, and Shadow doesn't have a lot of movement tools right now. So being able to have reliable procs to be able to do something while on the move is important. But if there's a lot of targets, or if you're constantly AoEing with Mind Seer, for example, you might want to take Mindbender, which is another level 45 talent. Or if you know you have multiple targets and you're going to be standing still, you can take Mindful Insanity, because then you can stand and turret.
Okay.
By the same token, the tier 5 talents, level 75, you've got Twist of Fate, which I'm going to come out and say it. I hate this talent. It's a passive DPS increase that for the majority of MoP you have had to game to be able to be anywhere near competitive. Effectively what it does is, if you damage or heal a target that is below 35% health, you get a buff for 10 seconds that increases all damage and healing done by 15%. And coming into 5.4, the threshold for it to proc was 20% instead of the current 35, which is interesting because the break-even point that we had found was right around 35 to 40% uptime to make it better than Power Infusion or Divine Insight, which Drye had mentioned earlier. So now it's kind of up to an even keel, but if you have a lot of ads, let's say, that come and go and are going to die, or if the rate is constantly dropping down low, like on Thok, as an example, if you can maintain a very high uptime because you're hitting a lot of targets that are low, then it just takes over, and if you don't leverage it, you're going to fall behind. It's kind of like, the reason why I hate it is kind of like why a lot of people hated DI, Dark Intent, that is, from Warlocks and Cataclysm. Because if you were in a raid with multiple Shadow Priests and you only had like one Warlock that could give it out, there was a huge discrepancy, and it was
so much
Shadow's
bitching about who got it.
Shadow's damage was largely balanced around having this, and it's similar with Twist of Fate. Anything that is a flat but random or not all the time guaranteed to be their damage increase should just go away.
Yeah.
To round out the tier 5 ones, Power Infusion increases haste by 20% multiplicatively, which leads to some fun times, like 20 ticks of a dot that, you know, it's ticking faster than sub 1 second when its base is 3 seconds, for example.
Yeah.
If the stars align, that is. And then it also increases all damage done by 5%. But it's not really used very much anymore. It was used more in TOC. Drye, do you want to talk about the level 90s?
Oof, no.
I can talk about the level 90s.
He doesn't even like his level 90s.
Take him out. Just take him out. Give me more damage. More damage.
I always thought it was really crazy that you guys had a level 90 talent that you basically had to use an add-on for to optimize its DPS. That's the Halo, that darn Halo thing.
It's I guess I will talk about it. Halo, Halo
sorry,
has
I'm
been
so painful
a
subject.
very unique ability. Shadow's always had very unique abilities throughout the entire class that aren't other classes don't have them. For example, Mind Flay was the only dot channel filler or main ability that any class had that was a channel until they added in Malefic Grasp. I mean, I guess Blizzard or Flame Strike and stuff like that, Rain of Fire, were technically channeled spells that were DPS orientated, but they were never like single target fill-in things. Shadow was the only one that ever had that, and then so they took that out, give it also to Warlocks, but now we're the only class that has something that's range based, which is very awkward to say the least. Like getting that range, that perfect range every single time, because the difference in damage between hitting a perfect Halo and Halo like 5 yards less is like 50, 70k, like literally that much damage. It's insane.
So you must love those fights where you have to like stack in a certain place.
Yeah, those are generally like where you have to be like the healing support role, and you just go a Divine Star.
Divine Star, yeah.
You take the DPS hit and go it.
It's really the fight mechanics and your strategy dictate what level 90 talent you end up taking. Because in theory, Halo is the highest DPS. But in practice, it really depends. If you can't get to optimal range, you're going to suffer. Likewise, you know, if your strat, let's say, use Tortos as an example. If your strat has, everybody's all spread out and nothing is within 30 yards of you. For Halo, you might be better off using Cascade if you want to hit all the targets. But by the same token, if everything's grouped up, you might as well use Divine Star because it's a focused fire.
Well, Divine Star has been nuts on some of these fights too.
Yes.
Yeah, it's pretty much like the reason we got brought in, or at least I personally got brought in for Thok, because Divine Star it just adds in like the whole room of taking out a healer and adding in the support role of the Shadow. So
now how different is, just to go offset, how different is like a discipline or holy Halo versus a Shadow Halo? Like in because theirs doesn't do damage, correct? It's just only healing for there.
It does damage as well.
It does damage as well. Yeah. So it just flip flops the values, I guess. Like what yours is more damage, less healing.
All the Paladin level 90 talents do damage and healing as well. I mean, it's just the way that they've designed these hybrid abilities.
Really, the difference comes from having to stand at an optimal range from the boss to do maximum damage, whereas for healers that are trying to choose a level 90 talent that's appropriate, it's really more about, is the raid stacked up or clumped? Can they kind of stand in the middle of everybody and hit a lot of targets? Or is there a major raid event happening every X number of seconds? Because all three of our level 90 talents are on different cooldowns. Divine Star's 15, Cascade's 25, and Halo's 40. If everybody's spread out and you have a damaging ability from the encounter that's happening every 30 seconds, let's say, you're probably not going to choose Halo. You're probably going to choose Cascade if the healing that's required on the raid isn't immediate. It doesn't have to be like right away and you're going to die, because it has to bounce. Whereas Halo, it's everybody basically at once.
Interesting. And Emily's curing it up in chat for me. I just didn't know how that works because, like, because my side, enhancement gives you, like, you get a single target nuke, you buff your elementals, or you get an extra thing on your unleash. But, like, it's very straightforward. There's not, like, a dichotomy where you have, they do different things or interact differently with your different specs. For a Shaman, it's very straightforward. So I was just making sure, like, I wasn't, like, mixing my, what the talents actually do for Disc, Holy, and Shadow. So, and then Anna, you said something else about this topic real quick too?
Well, I mean, I wanted to go into what chat wanted us to ask about in the first place. Since we had been talking about secondary stats and how y'all are gearing for different fights. I know there were a lot of questions about that best in slot list that Drye had linked, and we said we'd go into it later, so let's go into it now.
Sure.
I know that Shadow Priest stats there's been a little bit of change in the community as far as
an understatement.
Yeah, a little change apparently. So if y'all, I'm not clear on the details, and that's what we have you guys here for. So what's changed recently? What's the big news?
I'll let Twin go into the whole mathematical part, and then I'll explain
Twin-
it from like a
Yes.
reading point of view.
So
Go for it.
This, the core of this is that simulations are imperfect, and you're never going to have exactly what may happen in a real environment through a simulation, because there are split decisions that can occur that can make you do one thing versus another that makes sense in the context. Additionally, tools are only as good as the back end that enables them. You know, if you have a ruler that doesn't have inches at the proper distance, you might not know it until you can compare it to something else. So with a program like Simulation Craft, there is constantly updates and corrections, and bugs occur. There were 2 bugs that were present that have since been fixed. Actually, 3. The first one, well, let me take a step back. So originally we were telling people 1-to-1 ratio, crit to mastery, get to GCD cap, and you'll be good. And that was kind of a high-level view, when what we were seeing before was actually, if you take Mindflay Insanity, it favors mastery more, because Mindflay and Mindflay Insanity are dots, so they benefit from mastery. Whereas From Darkness Comes Light benefits from crit, because it has such a high proc chance now that you get GCD capped and you can never use all the procs, so you already have 2 and more procking, and they're just lost. So get more damage out of it instead of getting more of them. So bugs started to get fixed. One was with the way that Mindflay Insanity worked, where if Devouring Plague falls off the target and you're in the middle of a Mindflay Insanity channel, those ticks of Mindflay Insanity weren't getting the bonus damage.
What?
Okay. So if you have 12 ticks of Mindflay Insanity, okay, 2 of them weren't getting the bonus damage, but mastery ticks that were occurring on those don't get the bonus damage anyway. It's just the way that the game works, because mastery looks at your current stats when they occur. So what does that mean? It means that the value of crit was being undervalued, because mastery was already happening, but the damage would be doubled. The other error is escaping me at the moment. Drye, do you remember what it was offhand?
There was... Yeah, sorry, I thought my mic was still muted. There was one with the Toxic Totem trinket that wasn't working with mastery. Like, it wasn't proccing off like the possible damage. So that was being severely undervalued. So it's a lot better than we originally thought. But what was it?
Here it is. Chat has reminded me. Shadowy apparitions weren't classified as a shadow spell, so they weren't scaling with our passive 25% damage from shadow.
What the heck?
So shadowy apparitions come from Shadow Word Pain crits.
Yes.
So if you get more crits, you get more shadowy apparition damage. So crit was being undervalued again. And then what Drye was mentioning with the totem, which was one of the trinkets that we were using for the profile, is the multi-strike trinket is what Cardis totem is. And it wasn't doing damage. And this was a problem throughout.
It wasn't doing damage?
It wasn't just Shadow. It wasn't just Shadow. It was throughout the entire simulation craft. It was something that wasn't checked. Is when mastery checks would occur, they weren't doing the multi-strike chance roll to do damage. So mastery was being undervalued. At the end of the day, what we're finding, and this goes back to one of the things that we were talking about at the beginning of the show, is that there's a 5,000 or maybe a 10,000 damage difference between going like full mastery or full crit, and then having some balance in the middle. And that's sub 1%. That's sub 0.5% DPS difference. What we're finding is at high levels of secondary stats, whether you choose to go GCD cap or you just go to some haste breakpoint below that, like Devouring Plague +3 is 14,873 haste. Yes, I have these numbers committed to memory because I'm a geek. It's like, GCD cap is 18,215 haste. Yeah. Anyway, whether you choose a breakpoint somewhere lower or you go all the way to GCD cap, or you balance your crit and haste or crit and mastery, or you favor one versus another, we're at a plateau.
Yeah.
It's any secondary stats you start adding is just increasing your damage by roughly the same amount. Now, I will say that this is dependent on having 4-piece tier 16, because what 4-piece tier 16 does, and 2-piece impacts this as well, but 4-piece, it increases the damage done by your next Mind Blast, Shadow or Death, or Mind Spike, basically the big nuke spells, after you've cast Devouring Plague for 20% per orb used. So it's kind of like Mind Flay Insanity, but for nukes. And the reason this is more, it increases the value of crit is because you're already going to have a higher number. So if you crit, it's going to be an even bigger number. Without that, mastery pulls ahead slightly. But most people are going to be aiming for 4-piece. Now, if you end up with heroic Warforged pieces and only go 2-piece instead, then you'll probably want to favor mastery more. And I know Drye's got a few things to say about this, because
Drye is the man with the Drye's the man who posted the best in slot list to the chat earlier. So
yeah. Basically, in the best in slot list, I'm using 4-piece. The reason I'm using it is for a lot of the time, 4-piece is very good for nuking down a target, because it gives like those extra damage to those directed damage abilities. But being the patter that I am, I'll generally be throwing dots. I'll be throwing dots on things, mind searing, other things than what I probably should be doing. And you will gain more DPS from using 2-piece by itself, and then gaining the extra stats from Warforged. So I have a list of that, which I'm probably personally gonna be going to, just because I'm the patter. But I think just as the whole, because a lot of guilds don't allow people to pad, especially after progression is over with. But during progression, you definitely should always be aiming for 4-piece. But after it, I mean, it's, as we said, you can kind of pretty much do whatever you personally want. But I'm personally be going for GCD cap, but I'm Goblin, so I get like a little bit extra stats. And then pretty much full-on mastery. I'm a big fan, as I've kind of already been saying. DI, Insanity, or Toph. All 3 of those abilities are very nice with mastery itself. They all, I use this word probably way too much, but they all synergize very well together. Because the more haste you have, the more damage you should be getting from your dots, your Mind Flay and Mind Flay Insanity, because those are the abilities that your mastery is getting buffed from. So once you exceed a certain point, I believe it's 58, 56, right around that percentage of the total amount of damage done from your abilities, mastery starts greatly exceeding crit, to the point where it's just a rating conversion where you gain just significantly more DPS from that mastery. So that's what I'm going to be going for. I believe everyone currently is doing the DP3 with going crit and then mastery, which is also a very viable thing to do right now. I'm personally not a fan of it, because I think this might be awkward, but the better player will gain more DPS from haste, just because you will be able to maximize it more. You'll be able to predict movement in a fight, and so you'll know when you need to move, and you'll know when you can get Mind Flay casts off. You'll just be able to get extra casts off in general. So that whole haste definitely works more towards your benefit. So that's what I'm personally going towards. So the players who are not as comfortable with their class or with the fight, going for a lower breakpoint with less haste and just the passive stats like crit and mastery that your dots will be affected from while not moving, it's going to be better for them.
But it seems like from what you said before that there's not a huge difference between gearing one way or the other.
There won't be that large of a difference. Like, I believe it's 6K was the largest range we've seen between any of them, which is very, very small. Like, as Twintop was saying earlier, like, it's pretty much like an extra crit here and there. That's really much all it was, or not getting targeted by a stupid mechanic.
Huh.
You can gain more out of playing better than out of trying to micromanage your gear. And one thing to point out.
I mean, that's true for almost anyone.
Yeah.
It is, but it's exceptionally true in this case. If there's a general gearing strategy that I would like to put forth for players that are trying to gear, is because the value of secondary stats is so high, and we're not necessarily stacking one secondary stat to the maximum versus another one, try to bid on and go for balanced pieces. Ones that are like 1,000 of one stat and 950 of another, instead of going for something like 1,200 of one stat and 650 of another. You'll just get more secondary stats from the balanced pieces that then you can reforge to get to whatever sort of balance you're looking for.
Huh. Okay.
Little known, this is another math thing, the way that the secondary stats on gear works is they start out equal based on an item budget for item level, and then to increase one and decrease the other, to add 1 point of another one, you have to subtract 1.7 points from the other. So every 10 points you gain, you lose 17. So there's a delta that increases. It's never, you're never going to have more secondary stats on a piece that is highly imbalanced than you will on one that is balanced.
Yeah, and a different way to explain that, the way I've always seen it too, is that the crit versus hit, and like why people have crit caps, because eventually your D20 can only roll a hit or a crit, right? Now they have the new glancing system, right, where it's like a weird chance to like do 23% less damage or whatever like that. That's fine. That's a gating mechanic for DPS, so you don't just train wreck everything for melee. But so you only can have so much crit, and then your hit obviously is at a certain point, because their dice only has so many sides. You can only roll hit or crit, and it's just a percentage of which way you roll higher. But you can't. Once you can't roll misses anymore, you can't keep stacking, crit, like thinking you're going to gain even more. You only have so many sides on a dice. So the delta way or the dice, I always think about it as a dice. So, because the back end of it is sort of like a dice with the whole math system. So, but I think we're good on that. I think we can move on. I don't know. I think you guys have an earful of math. Do you guys have enough of that? If you have any questions, of course, how the show works, for those that are new, is that each episode is broken up into sections. We have obviously the show proper here, and then we also have the after show, which is after we go offline. We come back up a minute or two later, and we have just a non-scripted roadblock kind of thing where we just talk to the chat room, answer questions. We do have some questions in the show that we'll get to shortly. We have two more little topics here to brush on, but just so you guys know, if you have other questions that are like off the cuff or we haven't answered yet, then stick around for the after show, and you'll still be here with the guests, and we'll just talk to you guys candidly. But
and I'll pull Mega Man off the wall too.
Oh yeah, if people want to see Mega Man, yeah, I guess so. Yeah. So I'll take this next little one. Anna can take the rest. What do you guys have for add-ons for Shadow Priests? What are like recommended or suggested or even mandatory for how you guys handle things? And I've got your two screenshots, so let me know which one I need to pull up first. If
I guess I'll go first then. Let me see if I can quickly pull it up.
Sure.
All right. I think probably the most mandatory for anyone with a channeled ability is Gnosis casting bar, which you can see right there. Quartz doesn't accurately update channeled spells because of some, I don't know, whatever it is, but Gnosis properly does it with latency, with haste. It's mandatory. You need it. Like, that's the only cast bar you can really have, because throughout a lot of Shadow's history, clipping Mindflay at the proper time has been like the difference between a good and bad player. So having that is very essential. I definitely think, depending on which you prefer of tracking your dots, I personally use Forte. This is a little bit older of a screenshot, but I've added in just small little icons of AF dots just to make sure for, which is another add-on, that basically allows you to see when your buffs exceed a certain point, when it's optimal to refresh a dot. Yeah. So I definitely think AF dots has become, it's working with one of our senior members to make sure that the proper formula is being used. Like if you have these buffs, make sure to refresh that and type of a thing. But definitely AFDOTS, Gnosis, and probably the other two I would say are tidy plates, which you can see I'm using. It allows you to track your dots a lot easier. It allows you to see them right over the mob. So it's especially for those fights where you're just constantly mass dotting everything, it really helps out. And then just in general for anyone, I would say weak auras is huge. You can see mine weak auras. I've kind of added a lot since then, but you can see my weak auras are right above my player unit frames. It has all of my buffs going, so I can see when my trinket procs are happening. I generally have like the more ones that alter my cast speed or anything like that in the very middle of my screen, so I do have it showing twice, but it's definitely efficient for myself because UIs are always personal preference and the way you have things. Some people like having their stuff out to right, to left, in the middle of your screen, but this is the way I have it. I definitely think that weak auras, Gnosis, a dot tracking add-on, and tidy plates are almost essential for Shadow.
Mm-hmm. And then to go a little bit further in the rabbit hole, I know Twintop has some add-on suggestions.
One that is a must-have, it was alluded to earlier by Anna, is Halo Pro.
Yep.
There's many ways to skin the cat. It's basically a very specific range display that tells you when your level 90 abilities are in range. That's it. You can use other methods to do it as well, but it's a nice standalone to do it. I think it's on the screenshot that I sent you. So for mine, I'm a huge weak auras user. My entire HUD is all custom weak auras. And let's see here, if you can pull that up.
I have it pulled up yet.
Okay, so this is everything there except for the bar below. The bar below with the yellow dot in it is actually Halo Pro. And everything else in there is weak auras. Now, I know that the left and right indicators, those are for From Darkness Comes Light. Those are custom weak auras that mimic the Blizzard auras. And as you can see in the middle there, that is a Divine Insight proc that I have set to where when there's like 3 seconds left on it, or 4.5, I forget what metric I put in, it starts to turn red to say, hey, you need to use this, otherwise you're going to lose it. Just a little extra notification for me. But then, I've got my dots on the left and my major cooldowns on the right, and there's other things like above Shadow Fiend, which is on the far right. I'll have Shadow or Death pop up and let me know, hey, it's ready to be used. Buffs are tracked in the top left. They change color as they're getting ready to go off so that I know, hey, I can recast and get more out of it. Which brings me to those boxes that are on top of Vampiric Touch and Shadow Pain.
This blew my mind.
Yeah, no, I love those.
Oh,
you must have posted those on How to Priest somewhere because somebody gave me those auras or ones that look just like them for my ult.
Basically what those do is the background color, to take a step back, is AFDOT's Priest. Okay, and it's modified for my own internal brain thinking from what the default is. If it's red, the current dot that is on the target is doing less damage. If it's green, the dot that's on there is doing more. And each of those boxes is kind of taking piecemeal what the components are that are making up the dot. From left to right, it is spell power, mastery, haste, and crit. So on Vampiric Touch, you can see that spell power and crit are lower in the current dot that's on the target, but my haste is higher. So if I refresh it, I'm not going to get as many ticks, but they're going to hit harder. And this was especially important back when we used Unerring Vision, and it was like, and there was the dots were getting extended and trying to track, well, did I put up a Shadow Word Pain with Unerring Vision, it's getting 100% crit. I don't necessarily want to overwrite that, even if it's going to do more damage overall just from my dot ticks, until I have to. So I took some code that I found on MMO Champion, actually, that showed a textual display of all of the different different components, like down to the actual number, and turned it into the boxes that then get overlaid.
Yeah, no, when we saw this in the pre-show, I had to ask. So I was like, I look at the screenshot, and I'll go back to it real quick here. And I was like, all right, you got some weak auras on there, you got your cast bar, you got your, pop-up little thingamajiggies for your procs and your cooldowns. And I was like, what the hell are these little boxes for?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the deepest I've ever seen someone on the show yet, or even like an add-on that I've like looked for myself personally that really tracks. I mean, he said it's personal. You made this for yourself. So it's not like a readily out there thing. You can't download like Twintop's boxes of awesome. Maybe you should get that on that. Market that.
I've released it. I've posted it up in a couple places, and some people like use it. And there are people that are saying that in chat right now that yes, you don't even need it to be this complex. You can just use Afdot's Priest, and you're absolutely right. I personally wanted to know what the individual pieces were for that specific subcase, and plus at the time that I did this originally, Afdot's Priest was still barely being developed. It wasn't actually a functional add-on yet, and it has since become that.
Interesting.
And I leverage it on the background because, looking at each one, it's like, okay, is it better or worse? Well, what's the overall? Oh, Afdots is telling me that it is better, even though 3 of the boxes are red and 1's green.
Yeah. So we had another little topic here to talk about, but I think we're going to have to skip it to keep the show under budget here. So we're going to move on to the Mob and Minion Inquiry, which is how we end each show when we have questions. Again, you want to submit those questions. Where's the thing? Do it. I did. Yeah. Submit those questions over there at FinalBoss.tv. There is a question called Ask a Boss. And if you have a question for the show coming up, about when we announce at the end of each show, or we put it on Facebook or Twitter, or you have questions for a different class, we can always log those away and keep them for when we have people of the class on. So FinalBoss.tv, go over there and do the questions. But we have 3 questions here I'm going to bring up, and we will dive right into those, and I will copy and paste them as they go along. But this is a 2-parter. This one is from Nicobolus, who I think has been here for like almost every show.
Oh, yeah. He's chilling in chat.
Yep, and this is from US Zuljin. His question, I'm going to delay the putting it into chat, but he asked, the first part, we'll go one part first. Twintop and Drye, if you could change anything about the mechanics of Shadow Priest at present, what would you change and leave as it is, as it was in the past, and why? So it's a little convoluted. So what would you change or leave now, as it was in the past, if it was, and why?
Ooh, that's a tough question. Do we only get to change one thing?
I mean,
pick one.
I guess you could, if you could change anything in the mechanics of Shadow Priest at present, what would you change or leave as it was in the past, or now, and why? He said just one. Just one.
That's like orbs.
Here's kind of a cop-out answer that I know Drye will agree with.
Yeah.
It's more of an overarching theme. Shadow and Mob versus Shadow and Kata. Kata Shadow had a lot more synergy between abilities, where choosing to do one thing directly impacted the next several things that you did. For example, that Mind Flay would reduce the cooldown on Shadow Fiend, which then, when you had tier 13 4-piece, would be able to let you do a really jerry-rigged together burst sequence.
Yeah.
Was very interesting. And in addition, if you had Glyph of Mind Flay, I think it was, or was it Glyph of Shadow Word Pain, it would refresh the duration of Shadow Word Pain. I mean, there was just this synergy right there of, I have to make sure I tab back over to this target and cast Mind Flay to make sure that I don't have to waste a GCD later to put a fresh one up.
Yeah.
What do you think, Drye?
I think my biggest pet peeve right now, which they almost fixed at one point in time, but PvP stuck its head in there, was Mind Blast doing a ton of damage. I miss it so much. Like, Mind Blast is an 8-second cooldown. It needs to do a lot of damage. Like, it doesn't right now because of PvP. But I remember up until roughly around halfway through TOT. My Mind Blast in Firelands with the 4-piece, which used to be where if you have all 3 of your dots up on a target, back when Devouring Plague was a 24-second dot, Mind Blast used to hit for like 25%, and you would get like 300k Mind Blast, which was, for back then, was an absurd amount of damage. And up until like midway through like TOT, my Mind Blast still didn't hit that hard. Like, it's ridiculous how hard it was hitting back then in comparison to now. I really want Mind Blast to just go back to being the GOAT damage. Like, it needs to do it.
Well, real quick, because you said it, what does the GOAT mean for chat room?
The GOAT, we have our own like little ways of describing things in our guild. We say things are the GOAT when like they're really good. For example, Warlocks are the GOAT, but GOAT stands for greatest of all time. It's kind of one of the things that we just say.
Okay.
Like best thing ever.
Best thing ever, yeah.
Best thing ever type of a thing. So I just really want Mind Blast to go back to being the GOAT damage spell of ours.
There we go. Alrighty. I think we killed that one. And the second part of his question was, have you been able to appreciate significant differences with your current Simcraft calculations to our new reforging and gemming in 5.4? Is crit the way to go, or is mastery still a better secondary? The community waits for you. So I think we touched on this earlier in the show, but I think the long and short of this is crit or mastery right now in 5.4. Right?
The best average is when they're roughly the same. That's, if you want to just throw out an average, what everyone should do, they're both should be relatively close to each other. But depending on what you personally pick throughout all the fights, like I personally very rarely pick From Darkness Come Light. Which is the one that when your VT ticks, you gain Mind Spike procs. I really don't like that ability at all. I hate it, and I just love Insanity. I wish Insanity could be a little bit reworked, but for the most part, it gives you like that whole strength, like, hey, I'm hitting really hard, this is enjoyable, I feel like I'm doing a lot of damage. It's one of those type of abilities. So I personally tend to use it a lot more, so I'm going to be favoring Mastery, personally. But for an average of the community, I think an average would be the best way to go.
Okay. And Twintop, anything for you on that one?
I think we've really covered this. You know, it's if you feel better seeing big numbers, go with crit. If you like to have more procs that come from when you're choosing other abilities, go with a little bit more mastery. It's really what it comes down to, because the choice is largely inconsequential. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things at this point as much as it did earlier in MOP. Even in 5.2, in 5.3. The amount that it is now is just not really worth looking into, really, like micromanaging.
Now, do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing? Because I know that previously in the show we were talking about how it's kind of a bummer that you can't excel, that there's a smaller difference between being mediocre and being really great. But on the other hand, I think it's really neat that you can gear towards a playstyle that you enjoy more and have there be a difference that is basically within the margin of error of any of the sims that you're running. So do you have an opinion on how that worked out?
You know, it really seems that, looking back on it now, that Blizzard's goal was try to, with the talent system at least, was to try to make it so that you can choose whatever you want to do. How do you want to play the game? And you'll be successful. And what I've noticed from Sims, even, is that you take one gear set and you run the 9 different combos on the same encounter type, as long as there's more than one target. That's a huge qualifier, because a lot more damage ends up coming from dots. Is that the best and the worst are within like 2 or 3% of each other. It's really, if you want to eke out that extra little bit, you should do this. But then again, these are Sims. These aren't actual real encounters that you're working on. It's refreshing to be able to just say, okay, this is going to get me 98% of the way there, and that extra 2% probably isn't going to matter, because it's not like we're fighting for first place.
Yeah,
Or you'll gain more than 2% just by playing better.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes down to, just before we go to the second question, is a lot of it comes down to that so much of it doesn't matter unless you're at, like, the bleeding edge. Like, if you want to, like, min-max your character, that's great. But I think a lot of, like, the really specific questions like this, at least the way the game is right now, aren't, like, super swingy. Like, for, I think, of enhancement shamans, like, everyone's like, "Bae, do you go haste still, or do you go mastery?" And I was like, well, our AoE is good now, and we can AoE out of 9 of the 14 fights in Siege of Orgrimmar, so mastery is better. You can still go haste, just don't worry about AoEing as much, right? Like, that's how it is. Like, it's not a huge difference in overall damage range, but it's not a huge question, because unless you're really, 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 really pushing for it, you know, I think you're good to go, which I guess what these guys both just said. So.
Well, I've
Next
got
question.
another question for you guys, and this one's straight for Drye. Here's a question from Shuttle, who is probably someone with whom you're familiar. He says, "How do you manage to be an expert shadow priest, poster on how to priest, theorycraft for yourself and others while maintaining 5 days of raiding? It must be very hard to manage your time." So tell us all about the life of Drye.
It tends to be very difficult. I really, really need a second monitor, which will probably happen.
Oh my gosh.
How do you survive?
I already get enough from my guild. Okay, no need. I need a second monitor, which I'll probably be getting soon, but I'm AFK a lot when doing trash and stuff like that. Or, well, they already know. They already bashed me a lot for it. But I tend to alt-tab a lot, especially when I'm dead, and just have someone res me, because I don't have that secondary screen, so I don't see, like, when ready checks go out. I'm probably generally the last person to always click it. But it's kind of difficult. But for the most part, when we have theories already laid out, it's a lot easier. Recently, with just the huge wrench that's been in there, it's been a little bit more difficult. So lately it's been a little bit more difficult, especially with how well we've been doing as a guild. Like, we don't really raid that extra compared to a lot of guilds. I know a lot of guilds that are behind us right now are doing weekends, they're doing Friday nights, they're raiding longer. That's just not our thing. We get it done in a short amount of time, and so that's very nice to be able to go and do other things and not always have to be raiding, but still be able to play at the competitive level that we have to.
Yeah.
So it's pretty nice.
Yeah, definitely. I don't want to leave Twintop out of this, though, because you do a whole lot of this as well. I mean, direct questions is fine, but we can definitely, you know, do you have anything to add to that from your side? Because I know we talked about the blowtorch here and what you do with that.
Let's just say, so, interesting, funny side story. So, my wife is not a gamer.
Okay.
At all. But she understands. Well, she gets it, and I definitely do a dance to make everything balance.
He does a dance.
Hey. But, you know, an interesting side note to that is Frostmourne over there was actually an early wedding gift from one of her friends to me. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, she is very supportive, and she understands that really there are a lot of people that are looking to me for guidance, even if it's just a game.
Yep.
That it would be unfair to try to restrict how much work I try to do to get the best info out there. And, you know, so that means right around patch time, oh, it's pretty crazy. But then once everything's kind of leveled out, it's all right, go on to raid and, you know, get everything I need to do the raid. And then I'm going to go disappear offline for a while and do non-internet WoW things.
So I think that bottom line's to, that's why you put a ring on it. No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, it's a different way to talk about that, because when you have like a family and you're in like a relationship plateau that like maybe not a lot of, you know, players are at this level, that like there's a lot of time commitment involved, and a lot of people like can accept that to like a video game. And it's interesting to see how it's slowly evolving to be a little more socially acceptable. I think esports is doing a lot for that, or just how it's like part of your life. Like, you go to work, you come home, you have your social time, and then you play your game, and then you have social time again, and you go to bed. Like, that's sort of like how, as like the generation is right now, is kind of like developing. So it's interesting to see.
The way that I've always pitched it
Yeah.
is that, as far as rating goes, is, you know, I could be in a beer league softball league with people from work, and I'll be gone a couple nights a week for hours at a time playing softball and socializing.
Yep.
Rating is exactly the same thing. There's other people that are depending on me because I'm part of a team, and we have, you know, these set times where we have our matches, our games. We go and we raid, but once that's over, it's time to get back to other things.
Yep.
You know, you've had your fun, you've had your entertainment, it's good, it's healthy, but don't forget about other things that are also important. And a lot of people lose focus in that.
Oh, definitely. I think there's definitely, not to like pick on like age ranges in this game, but it's definitely something that you grow to understand. Because I know when the game first came out and I was just in college, I played too much of this game. But then as you get older, you kind of realize that, you know, you can fit in what you need to do and then do what you should be doing, or things that are a little more important in that regard than just playing a game. But it comes down to different responsibility levels too. When you have community interaction and stuff like this with the show, like I work 2.5 jobs, and people always wonder, like, how do you do the show behind the scenes? How was it made? You know, and we're doing an episode on that in the future, but like it takes some time. So I don't know. Those are good answers.
As my guild leader pops in and says he's restricting my rating.
Oh no, we got you in trouble now. Well,
I think we can all agree that a work-life rating balance is very important. You know,
Yeah.
almost everyone we've had on this show has talked about how they appreciate the limits on their raid time. Even the guys at the very top, you know, they'll talk about how they just go and they progress and then they're done and then they've got tons of spare time.
Yep.
Nobody that we've had on this show who really cares about the community and who cares about raiding and who interacts with people has been like, man, I just want to spend all of my time playing WoW. Like we have balanced lives. That's how we all are.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's time to push the play button on this.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have been awesome. Get the sword. Do it
Get
out.
that sword. Get it out.
Yeah, there we go. Wow, get it out. I wish I had different names for this show, but
Thing is amazing.
yeah.
There is a That's What She Said in there somewhere.
There is. That was she said. Twintop from SlashHug. Go to slashhug.com to check out everything SlashHuggable and more from this gentleman. Thank you very much for being on the show, sir, and bringing your sword with you. Oh, I think you're muted. Did you mute yourself? No, you hit the button.
No,
You moved.
I'm trying to avoid it all. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Drye, whatever we're awesome, the WWA, thank you very much for being on the show tonight, sir. You muted yourself, too.
Oh,
This is get it. Push the button.
we got.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Thank you very much. Sorry, I was drinking water. I didn't want the whole slurp sound going down.
Oh, goodness. Whatever
Thank
we're
you very
awesome.
much for the invite.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome. Whateverwe'reawesome.com for everything WWA. And good luck on Garrosh when you start tonight and tomorrow.
Thank you.
NFL, Something Wicked, Twitter @NFL, super hard. She's pretty prolific on that thing. You should go follow her. She talks about all things. And there's some shoes in there sometimes, too.
It's also way less 8-bit than the way I am on the show.
I think they're going to start putting that in when they tweet at you now, the 8-bit Anna.
8-bit Anna.
8-bit Anna is starting.
We'll make a trend. Hashtag 8-bit Anna.
There it is.
I just wanted to thank again Twintop and Drye for coming on. It's just the work that y'all do for your class is really important, and not every spec has people doing the level of work that y'all have, and it was great to hear from y'all. It's the details of what you do. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having us.
You. We love the
Remember,
community.
it's more than just us. There's
More than just
lot
you. Yeah.
of other people that put a lot of time in.
Yeah, the Shadow Priest community is great. There are tons of you guys who are really excited about it, so hope they like the video. Make sure you spread it around.
Yeah, and then of course there's me. I gotta hit the play button again because it's about to. There it is.
I like you too, Bae. Sorry.
No, is there me? I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, I shaved up a little bit for today. I kind of kept it nice, but I'm over at twitch.tv BayTLM. You can watch us progress over there and do all the things. I usually stream 4 nights a week. But yeah. So here's the beta test. When this goes up on YouTube tomorrow, all the VODs go up on YouTube. On the main show, on this episode 11, I want you guys to comment on the show in the comment box, just comment box, if you want a Mistweaver Monk episode or a Windwalker Monk episode. And we'll tally all the votes by about Tuesday night, and then we'll build the show next Sunday for either Mistweavers or Windwalkers, whoever wins. We have options for both, but we wanted to give you guys sort of an input on that. Go to the YouTube VOD on the YouTube page, and go vote for them. And we'll tally the comment votes, and we'll go for that. Because the episode after this next one coming up next week is special, and we'll talk about that when we get closer to it. And so will the guys involved. It's going to be super cool. It's going to be a pushed forward episode, but next week's is the same. But again, go to YouTube, and it's Final Boss WoW, and tell us if you want Mistweavers or Windwalkers.
We'll be tweeting it.
Yep, and when everyone from behind the scenes here at Final Boss TV, we'll see you guys here next week, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, and 10 CET, right here on Final Boss TV. You guys are awesome. Thank you very much. Have a great night, everybody. And if you're sticking around, see you for the after show.
Thanks, guys. See you guys
Wave
later.
bye. Wave bye. My stupid face. There it is. Wave with Frostmourne. Perfect. Have a good one, everybody.